Yeah, we finished off Friday's Business and Markets Day on the political street, and that's where we're starting today's edition of Your Business Morning. I am Busi Namafayi. Of course, the political circuit took a very bigger picture on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, because President Buhari and his team were all over Lagos, the country's financial and economic epicenter, holding rallies and meetings and talking to everyone, trying to ramp up on supports ahead of this very crucial weekend election. President Buhari is seeking his first re-election and therefore is holding closed-door meetings early on Saturday with the bigwigs of the business community, and that was a closed-door meeting that was, and then the vice president later in the day, Yemi Oshibajo, meeting the stock market regulator and participants, and all of this in the countdown to President Buhari's first re-election. And that's very crucial there. That's the big story on Nigeria's street today. There's the difference between the market and the political street. There's not much difference until perhaps the presidential election is done with over the at the weekend. So all of that is one big story for us this week. Meantime, we're keeping one eye on some core economic data. The Statistics Office will release the fourth quarter GDP data tomorrow, Tuesday, the 12th, 8:30, bright and early in the morning. That's your breakfast for tomorrow. And that's our breakfast here as well on Business Morning. And as we digest all of that in the GDP numbers, we'll now be coasting home on Friday, a day before the elections, with our January CPI, that's the Consumer Price Index and Inflation Report. Friday 15th, so you have Tuesday and Friday locked into your economic data. All of that will be a very big conversation on the social media. But one story that is in the middle of the week is the what you call the Valentine's Day of Thursday, the 14th. So the big question is whether the Saturday's 16th presidential election will overshadow 2019 Valentine's Day, which is Thursday. Keep it there, keep some love. That's what they say for the Valentine. And we can watch what you call our lipstick index for that day. Interesting, isn't it? Let's start with Omefe. Romosele from Afrinvest is here with us in the studio at the global headquarters here in China this morning, and she's the one talking about business and insurance, but first about Valentine. Just a second, we'll get to Temple in just a second. Good morning.
Good morning, boss, and thank you for having me.
Who do you think this week will shape your Valentine?
Not really.
Not really.
Not really. I think I'm still going to have an awesome Valentine's Day.
Love goes on despite the elections. That's her take. What's your take? Meet me on social media, whether this 2019 Valentine's Day should be trumped by the presidential elections on Saturday. Temple Ashaju, let's bring him to the conversation. Temple is live to us at our studios, as always, at the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Temple, good morning. Hope you had a very great weekend. What's your take? February 14th, that's the Valentine's Day. We'll be looking at the what you call the lipstick index, and then the Saturday is the elections. What's your vote? Vote for love first or vote for the next president?
You do both, actually. I think it's better to do both because you show love to Nigeria by voting for your candidate on February 16th. So you combine both February 14th and February 16th. Let's do the two. At the end of the day, we'll get some good results.
I'm sure a lot of folks, couples, if you miss this Valentine, as it were, and then you tell your wife, I'm sorry, I missed it because I was thinking about the elections, then you got some issues after the elections.
It should be vice versa. Wives should also tell their husbands, of course, that they forgot it. So at the end of the day, we'll be able to reach a balance.
You mean you forgot Valentine's Day because of the elections? Okay, that's going to be some problems if that happens, isn't it? Yeah.
Let's just avoid the problems. Focus on Valentine's Day, February 14th, and then the elections, February 16th, and you have a happy life.
Exactly. You need both them. You need those tempo. You got the advice there, isn't it? Mark the register on the 14th, then you can go on the 16th to do. Without that, then perhaps you'll be held back at home on the 16th. You didn't have Valentine on 14th. well, I'm not sure I'm letting you out of the house on the 16th. And nobody has talked about Valentine. None of the presidential candidates have talked about Valentine at all. That's interesting. When is the campaign closing, Temple? Any idea?
I think it's done. We should be done by this week or so. We finished off last week, I think, and I think a week to go to the general election. There shouldn't be any form of campaigns anymore. I'm not sure, but or if it's 20, or I think it's 24 hours to the campaign, to the election rather. I'm not too sure. But then I think we should just focus on love for the country, because it looks like election has taken over Valentine now. So it should be more patriotism, more of love for the nation eventually.
Now that the politicians are listening to us, you know what they're going to do? They're going to start sending out Valentine messages to Nigerians. Those guys are very smart. You see, you just watch. Before the end of today, you'll see all the presidential candidates sending, we love you, we love Nigerians, and all of those lipstick thing and all of that. They will do that. Trust them. They were not going to miss this Valentine.
You could be right.
Yeah, most likely.
Yes,
just
right,
watch. Just watch.
We might see that
it's not a campaign. It's just wishing Nigerians love and what have you, whatever they do on the 14th. They say, oh, God, this is a very loving presidential candidate. Maybe it's going to sway the way some folks will vote, depending on who sends the sweetest Valentine story on the 14th. Temple, hold on a second.
So
Don't mind me this morning.
The two presidential candidates, the two major presidential candidates in the plan.
Maybe they should just send a Valentine message to each other.
We'll throw that to the two major presidential candidates.
No, about 12 or 15, almost 20 of them there. Let's see what happens on the 14th. We're going to watch that. We're going to talk about Valentine, the business on Valentine on the 14th. And we're going to look at what you call the lipstick index. Don't miss that, everybody. Tempo. So let's get on to the market. The market has been showing some love, isn't it? Last week, there was a big rally. We had the sweetest rally on the stock market since 2019 started last week, isn't it? Now, if we raise our year-to-date, we had some little positive readings in our all-share index. Talk to us about that.
Well, so it's love for maybe some relatively peaceful pre-election season, and of course, more love for the dividends that will be coming from the companies eventually. Those are the two key reasons why we saw a whole lot of participation in the market last week from both the foreign investors and, of course, the domestic investors, both at the equities market and, of course, the debt market, although it's more on the side of the debt market than in equity market. But eventually, we still experience the same thing. If you look at the all-share index, last week we're up almost 3%, 2.92% precisely. We got the month-to-date gains printing 3.2%. That's positive. We also saw the year-to-date returns moving back into the positive territory, rising some 0.3% eventually. And if you look at the activity level for the week, it was really awesome, heavier than what we saw in the preceding week. Volume was up some 1.89 billion, and we saw some value of some 26.88 billion naira. And that was in 19,213 deals. Now, if you look at how the sectoral analysis came up with the figures that they have, the banking segment of the market, we saw some 8.10% in terms of the performance there. And FBN Holdings was positive in this regard, did so much good to the segment for the week-to-date analysis. FBN Holdings rose 8.8%. Guarantee Trust Bank jumped some 14.69%, while Zenith Bank also did some 6.32%. Of course, you have a whole lot of other banking names doing so much of contributions to the banking sector. The insurance segment of the market was also up on 4%. We got ICO doing some 12.5%. Mansard Insurance also rose some 4.64% after the news broke that they are going to be supporting one of the major football clubs, in the global stage. Now, if you look at consumer segments of the market, rose some 4.10%. Nigerian breweries jumped some 5.41% in that regard. And Nestle, which is one of the most highly priced stock in the market, rose some 5.63%, advancing beyond 1,500 naira in its share price. Oil and gas segment of the market was also positive. It was only the industrial goods segment of the market that was negative, and that's because of some huge profits taken. There are quite a number of investors that have been watching the numbers around Dangote Cement, CCNN, and of course WAPCO, and it was an opportunity for them with the level of entrance inflow that we saw in the market last week. It was an opportunity for these key speculative investors to quickly take profit before the market eventually dips into losses. But for the oil and gas segment of the market, which this takes us to now, this now takes us to the energy segment of the market. You got a bit of decline in corn oil, which shed some 1.08% in its share price. But we saw a bit of appreciation across 3 other stocks, which was the reason why we saw the segments in the market, closing positive last week. You got Etana PLC rising some 3.3% after we saw just 169,771 units of the shares traded. Seplat also rose some 5.7%, and we got Japol rising 5%. At the NASD OTC, there was more of profits taken because we saw a bit of interest in the stock market. We saw a bit of portfolio rebalancing at the NASD OTC, where you have unlisted securities. Some of the brokers quickly traded off at the NASD OTC to move some fund back into the stock market proper, since we're beginning to see some good inflows in the market. So it was also an opportunity to take an advantage there. And so the NASD USI declined some 3.40%, leaving room for more entries now from some other investors this week. And of course, the market capitalization was at 519.77 billion naira. That's a reduction compared to the 530-something billion naira that we saw in the preceding week. Volume was just 1.9 million and valued at 56.95 million naira. If we go to the bonds segment of the market, which is the debt side of the market now, generally for the bonds and yield, if you look at the curves together, the yield curve last week saw some 11% contraction in terms of 11 basis points contraction rather in terms of week-on-week analysis to some 14.6%. Look at the bonds precisely. There was a bit of bullish sentiment in the bond market following increased participation by the FPIs and, of course, some domestic investors. And, of course, that's also due to the fact that the United States Fed has now slowed down in its policy normalization activities. We also saw the fact that there's a bit of relative peaceful pre-election period, and that created room for some good investors to also come into the market. Basically, we saw interest in the July 2030 and April 2037 security as bearish sentiment dominated the Treasury bills market.
Temple, let's weigh in a little bit here on the equity side of the conversation. Thank you very much. Of course, I should stand by there later on the program to talk to us about this very important week, trading the economic data and February 16 election. That's the big story for this week, and I'm sure everyone will be talking about that on your market straight